Our first presenter this afternoon is another long-time Embedded Vision Alliance participant and content contributor, Michael Tusch from Apical. Michael's going to talk about better image understanding through better sensor understanding. And I got a bit of an advanced preview of his talk during a session that we did yesterday evening, a video interview that we conducted with Michael. So a brief bit of the abstract. One of the main barriers to widespread adoption of embedded vision is its reliability. Systems which detect people some of the time or which produce frequent false detections are of limited use for obvious reasons. Why is it that algorithms which work well in the lab don't work so well in real-time conditions? Cameras perform a great deal of image processing in order to make video look natural and realistic. However, this often leads to unpredictable variations in the input data to embedded vision algorithms. Now, I'll stop reading now and save the rest for him to tell you about so I don't ruin the surprise. Thanks, Michael.
Well, thanks, Brian, and I think you've completely summarized my talk, actually. So, but I'll give a bit more detail, just to fill out the time. 5 minutes, okay, great, that's enough. Just a brief introduction, perhaps for those of you who don't know what we do. We've been working for a number of years on image processing technology, and we design camera subsystems. In other words, the part of a chip that drives the camera, that controls the lens and the sensor, and also runs through all the stages to turn Bayer data to the images we like to see. Most of our designs go into SoCs, sometimes on FPGAs, and we work on both consumer and industrial types of system, like surveillance and automotive. And what it means is we have to combine getting very natural-looking images with getting cameras to work in a very wide range of conditions. You might ask, what is an image processing company doing at these events? And we have been coming for the last couple of years. Our interest really is in the interaction between image processing and computer vision. At the first sight, it might appear that image processing and computer vision don't have much to do with each other. I mean, they serve completely different functions. Imaging is about visualization and making pictures that we like to look at. Computer vision is all about, as we heard, about extracting information from the scene. But there is actually more to this than more relevance between imaging and computer vision than it might appear at first sight. And that's what I'd like to talk about in this talk. So I started this theme back in April in a talk I gave then, and since I'm sure nobody can remember anything about that, let me just briefly summarize what we were talking about. So here's an example of a frame that might be the input into a computer vision algorithm. Now, this is actually quite hard to process effectively because all sorts of things have been done to that frame before it left the camera. For example, the video has been compressed, so we've lost information in the scene, and we've also added artifacts which aren't going to be very helpful. The resolution is low here, and we might actually have to downscale it even further to process this data in real time, which is going to make it difficult to detect objects which are small, for example. The noise levels in this sensor are completely unknown. Obviously, in dark regions, we're going to have more noise than in bright. But there's been a lot of nonlinear processing to generate this image, and we have no idea what those levels are. Color accuracy is also unknown. Hopefully the colors look broadly realistic, but if we've got any algorithms that determine are based on having accurate colors, they may or may not work well. And the important point is that if we're outside the camera, we don't actually know anything about what's happened. If we had some information about the processing that had been going on, that might be helpful, but typically it's just blind. And that makes a problem that's already difficult, people detection in unconstrained environments, even more difficult. And our thinking is about how we're going to make that problem a little bit easier by understanding more about how we've generated that image. So let's just come back briefly to what we're talking about. We're talking about an ISP, an image signal processor. So it's the sequence of transformations that turn raw data from a sensor into images that look realistic to us. And those images have been formatted so they look good on typical displays, which have a certain nonlinear response called gamma. And ISPs are not usually designed with embedded vision in mind. And in fact, sometimes visualization due to an ISP and vision are in direct conflict. In other words, a lot of the processing stages that are used to create natural images are adaptive and nonlinear, which means that they give unpredictable results. Demosaicing, color management, dynamic range control, and noise reduction, sharpening. They all give us great pictures, and they emulate what our eyes do, which are also highly adaptive, but they affect sensor data unpredictably. And actually, for computer vision, we don't want really any of that. We would like to use the sensor as a kind of calibrated instrument, a calibrated instrument whose data is well characterized, whose noise levels are fully understood, and out of which we can extract quantifiable probabilities, which we can then use as a basis for vision. So in some respects, these two things are in direct conflict. But on the other hand, some of the things that we do in image processing might actually be quite helpful for the vision problem. And that's really the theme of the talk. If we can understand how data is being captured, how much better could we make our embedded vision system than just blindly working on the data that comes out of the camera? And because we haven't got much time, I'll just talk about one specific problem, which is people detection and tracking, obviously an important problem, and people detection and tracking in difficult conditions. In other words, not the nice conditions of a room like this, but maybe outdoors at night. So, and again, to narrow down the focus of this talk, I'm just talk solely about the problem of noise. Actually, there are many things I could talk about, but noise is one important thing that I'll make the theme of this talk. It's obviously harder to detect and classify objects in noisy images. That's actually quite important because there are quite a lot of situations where cameras are noisy. At night time is a very easy example. If we've got a compact module, in other words, a cheap one, it might have a cheap lens, it might have a very small sensor with very small pixels in it, and that's also going to make our system noisy because less light gets into the camera, the pixels themselves are small, and therefore our signal-to-noise ratio is low, we get noise under any conditions. Also, if we're trying to detect and track fast-moving objects, obviously we have to reduce our exposure time, and that pushes up our ISO, which adds noise to the image again. So it's actually quite a common problem. And it's hard to get algorithms that are reliable in low noise to work well in high noise. It's actually very hard, and the question is, why is it so hard? Well, one, and we don't have so much trouble with it, with our own vision systems. One way of thinking about it is, actually, if you look at this thumbnail, this is actually what the people detection algorithm is going to be using. It's going to be using an upper body shape. And once you extract that from the background, you can see that it's not that easy to figure out that that's a human under these conditions, even when we look at it. So that's an illustration of why the problem becomes quite hard. But let's think about exactly how hard it is and how we might make it a little bit easier if we understand a bit more about the noise that causes these challenges. So we'll talk about a test system, and in fact, it's the same system that you can see up on the demo tables, on the demo table upstairs. What we want to do is remove all sorts of compromise in the computer vision part and concentrate solely on the quality of the initial data. So what we do is we'll process full HD, 60 frames per second. We'll use a hardware implementation of HOG and SVM using multiple classifiers and scales, and we'll do it all in real time. And also what we'll do is we'll take the raw data directly off the sensor rather than processing the kind of YUV or compressed data that typically comes out the back end of a camera, because that contains the maximum amount of information, and also it's very well characterized. And let's see what we can do with that system. So here it is in a block diagram form. So we have the sensor on the left, and that's streaming raw data through our engine. And when that data enters the engine, it goes in two directions. It goes through an ISP, which is used to generate the visible imagery that we see on the display. And that raw data is also taken through an analytics engine, which does the feature extraction, the classifications, and so on. The hardware engine, the analytics engine, can run up to 16 classifiers at once. And a classifier is an attribute of the human body, like a head position, or an upper body position, or full body position. And by combining these together, we can use a kind of deformable parts approach to figure out if there's a person there or not. It works on lots of different scales. From in a single HD frame, it can detect an object as small as about 45 pixels wide up to about 550 pixels per wide. And because we can do it in real time, we can track accurately. We've got enough detections per frame that we can stick them together in time and track people. So these are two very separate parts of the system, the ISP and the analytics engine, but we do allow them to talk to each other. So information that comes out of the ISP can be used to help the analytics engine and vice versa. And at the output, we have some video data that we display and some metadata that tells us about where the objects are in each frame, and we can draw rectangles and things around them to take a look. And here's a picture of the actual system. We've implemented this on a zinc board, so thanks very much to Xilinx for producing such a nice system. We're taking raw data through HDMI into that board and sending video data out via HDMI to the screen, and via Ethernet we're collecting metadata. So let's use this platform to do the following experiment. Let's analyze the accuracy of our detections as a function of increasing ISO, or increasing noise. And what we can do is compare a blind method, in other words, one which is ignorant of any noise statistics of the image and the sensor, with one which is noise aware. And to make this a fair comparison, let's use the best possible blind method. So we won't do any compression, we won't do any nonlinear adjustments to the data, and so on. And the only difference between our two experiments will be the inclusion or exclusion of information about the noise. So we won't do any noise reduction, for example. We'll just include information about the noise in the scene. And let's just talk briefly about what noise is, so we understand really what we're talking about here. So what I'm showing here is what's called a noise profile. This is actually something we get for free in the image processing engine, because this has to be known in order to control the whole pipeline. It's used to control stages from noise reduction to color management, demosaicing, sharpening, and so on. So it's actually a noise profile is an integral part of the image processor. It's a characteristic of the sensor itself, and it's typically obtained by a kind of taking a set of images of Macbeth charts in a lab at different lighting conditions and measuring how noisy they are. And what we can see there on the vertical axis is the noise level, which is the root mean squared deviation of pixel intensities in a uniform patch around the mean value. And the horizontal coordinate is the intensity of that patch. So you can see as intensity goes up, noise goes up, but you can see that the signal-to-noise ratio in a dark part to the left is lower than it is on the right, which is what you'd expect. And we can fit a pretty good curve to that, which is what we call the noise profile, which is characterized by that formula, where sigma, of course, is the noise, the root mean square noise. And we have two parameters which relate to the sensor. The first one is what we call the analog noise, which is the noise contributed by all the circuitry, and that's roughly Gaussian. And the second is what we call the quantization noise, or sometimes the photon noise, which is all to do with the fact that photons come in packets. So we have a kind of Poissonian noise distribution from that. Actually, there are other sources of noise as well, but these are small compared to these in the sensors that we're looking at for this experiment. So if we look at that, what we can see is firstly that noise depends on intensity, I, pixel brightness, and secondly that noise depends on ISO, which is effectively the gain that we have to apply to make the image bright enough. And what we can do is we can use that noise profile to adjust our probability detections in shadows and highlights. And our aim is to use that to reduce false positives due to noise and misdetections. So how actually do we use such a noise profile? What do we do with it? Well, this is actually a picture of our hog edge statistics. So if we look at the images on the right, what those pixels are showing is the amplitude of an edge in our hog analysis, and the color is actually showing the direction. So a red is a vertical edge, green is a 30-degree angle, and blue is a 60-degree offset angle. And I don't know actually if you can see. You can't see any difference, can you? I should have anticipated that. If you were to look at these on a good screen, you would see that the upper picture looks a lot. There's a lot more noise in that picture. So there are a lot more false edge detections than there are in the lower one. So even though we haven't actually done any noise reduction to the image, and in fact we don't want to do any noise reduction because that might kill detail if we're not very careful. But by including noise, we're able to eliminate false edges within the basic hog statistics. And of course, those are the statistics that drive the higher level analytical functions. And that's what's going to contribute in the end to our detection probabilities. If you look at this, which will be on the web, you'll be able to see those two images. The difference is much better than you can see here. So let's actually look at some results from this system. So let me see if I can run this. So here what we're doing is we're tracking some people in a room. The blue and green indicators are showing per frame detections, and then the red squares are showing detected and tracked individual. And you can see that it's doing a good job of continuously tracking people as they wander around and overlap each other and so on. You can see the odd false detection. In fact, there's one you can see that yellow carrot shape there. But these are, occasional, and they don't contribute to any tracking, so they get ignored quite comfortably by the scheme. So this is at ISO 100, which is under good conditions. And in fact, if we included or excluded noise, you wouldn't see any difference in these schemes. But let's go up to ISO 1600. It's 4 times more noisy than the original. And what we've done to generate this is we've just stopped down the lens. So we're just allowing less light into the lens, so we can use the same scene, but it is a higher noise level. Again, you may not be able to see the noise that well on this screen, but let's just look at the same scene. And so here we're not bothering about noise. So you can see there are a lot more false detections cropping up, but again, they aren't really contributing to the tracking capability. But look at this guy as he walks across the room. Now we've lost him. So he's trying to pick him up again, it's lost him. So you can immediately see there's been some degradation in the quality of our detection and tracking as we include noise into the scene. Now let's just include our noise profile, as I indicated before. In other words, we inform our hog statistics based on the noise characteristic, the noise profile of the sensor. And you can still see false detections happening, but let's look at what happens here. Yeah, so we're able to continue to track that guy in a way we couldn't before. So we can definitely improve the accuracy by knowing a bit about the noise. And in fact, I can show you some numbers here. If you look at the first column, which is the ISO 100, you can see that, for example, if we look at the number of weak or missed faces, or the number of weak or missed upper body detections, it's about twice as much when we don't know about noise compared to when we do know about noise. Now, because of the way we group these detections together, that discrepancy doesn't really show up at ISO 100. If you look at the number of missed people or false positives, that's still 0, because if we don't detect a face but we detect an upper body, that's fine. At ISO 1600, we see a similar trend. We see about double the number of false detections or missed detections, and actually around about 5 times the number of false positives. And that actually starts to translate into more missed people, because we're now below the threshold at which the grouping can function. And in fact, we've got 8 times more missed people detections when we don't include noise. And we've got 5 times more false positives. That's actually quite a significant amount. If we look at our overall detection rates, let's look at ISO 1600 people detection rate. We're able to get near to 100% detection rate, even at ISO 1600 with all that noise, if we take the noise analysis out, we've actually dropped our detection accuracy by tenfold, from 0.3% to 3%. And similar story for false positives. And you might wonder why the face detection rate gets worse relatively more than upper bodies, because faces tend to be smaller. So in other words, if we'd done this experiment with people further away, we'd see a much bigger effect. So here's the conclusion, really, that here's just one example. If we incorporate things that we know anyway about the scene, we can actually have a significant increase in our detection rates. And we'd have to work extremely hard to try to do that within the computer vision algorithm. It may be impossible, actually. And noise is just one of several characteristics which we need to build in if we want to go from a video camera with computer vision bolted on to a calibrated instrument. And what it does actually also incidentally show is that state-of-the-art Hog SVM-based detection and classification algorithms, if they're well implemented, can work with high reliability even in what would be considered difficult conditions, provided we can model them, of course. And just to conclude, I mean, why are we doing all of this? Well, I mean, this is one of the things we were interested in doing is analyzing people's behavior for fairly obvious reasons. And by the way, I've left in the detection of that mannequin there. It's been detected as a person. It's easy to remove that if you take motion into account, but just to stress that what we're doing is a per-frame detection. We're detecting these people in every single frame of the sequence. And that's a nice thing to be able to do. We can detect which way they're looking and which way they're going and what they're doing. But if this is useful information, well, this is also useful information. This is the same scene at night. And it's just pointless to have a system that can give us good data here but can't give us equally good data there. So we do see that solving these kind of problems is rather fundamental in making these systems actually useful in the wider world. I thought I'd end with this rather melancholy scene, actually. I think we've all been there at one time or another, perhaps. But it's this idea of understanding behavior via accurate and real-time analytics is something that interests us greatly. And I'm not sure where this will lead, but I think it's a very exciting topic. So just to finish off, we've got a demo upstairs, as I mentioned. A bit of information on our website. This is all very new, so there's not a lot there, but we will be adding more material as the weeks go on. A few links to the always excellent website. And, well, thank you very much for your time.